Hey, friends, welcome back to the Insider's Journal, where we wrestle with maximizing our eternal outcomes as Christian leaders. We're in part 2 of our 6-part series on money, diving into what they don't tell you on Sunday. In part 1, we debunked the myth that money's evil. It's greed that we need to watch out for. Our series rolls on. Let's get started. Growing up, my dad had a favorite label for anything he didn't like: communist. If I mouthed off or stepped out of line, he'd say, "You communist." It was half joking, but it stuck with me. Later in life, I realized he was passing down a perspective I've shared with my own sons. Systems that demand equal outcomes, like communism, don't work. They ignore how God wired us to create and steward. But that got me thinking about another system we often misapply: the Levitical order from the Old Testament, and how it sneaks into what we hear or don't hear about money on Sunday. Here's the problem. In the Old Testament, the Levites were God's priests. Unlike the other 11 tribes, they didn't get land. Their job was temple work, sacrifices, intercession, and they lived off the tithes of grain, wine, and livestock from the others. It was a wholly socialist system, designed as good for time prior to Jesus' work. But today, that Levitical model has crept into the church, and it wasn't meant to. Now, professional ministers often hesitate to talk money because they're caught in a system that feels like they're the new Levites, depending on your giving for their livelihood. And it creates a false divide of a ministerial class and a laity class. Here's the truth. Laity isn't even in the Bible. 1 Peter 2:9, it says we're all a royal priesthood. Every believer is a priest called to serve God directly. This Levitical lens distorts how we handle money and why it doesn't get talked about much on Sunday. Professional ministers, those who are earning their living through Christian ministry, may not fully grasp P&Ls, balance sheets, investments, or risk. They're focused on the study and communication of Scripture. Often, we're told to give like we, the secular class, are funding a sacred class, not living as priests ourselves. And it can make us feel like ATMs, not stewards. Acts 4:32 through 35 shows a better way. Early believers shared everything, not out of obligation, but because they were one in heart and mind. Their generosity wasn't about feeding a system. It was about trusting God as provider, as all priests do. They got from God, not from man. So what's the action step? First, be kind to your pastor and those professional ministers. They're navigating a tough spot, and it's often not normal for them to talk about money because of the false system. Having never been in sales, they don't realize they're, in fact, in sales, and feel diminished when talking about money because they think it's a negative thing that they need. Instead of expecting them to be financial gurus, seek God's wisdom yourself. As a priest, dive into Scripture, Proverbs, Matthew, Acts, and find Christian mentors who understand business and faith. In the master's programs, Life Mastery, we align our roles: personal, professional, family, kingdom. Your money, those decisions should reflect your priestly calling, not a Levitical tax. Second, embrace radical generosity. Acts 4:34 says, "There were no needy persons among them." Could this be said about our country? That wasn't communism. It was heartfelt sharing. Communism becomes Earth's evil answer, perhaps even God's justice, when greed rules. What if the West's greatest export and contribution wasn't democracy, it was generosity? Ask, Who can I bless with a gift, a car, an extra room, or money to help them start an endeavor? Does my giving need a 501c3 or ROI before I give? What about giving a struggling family a spare laptop? No receipt needed. It could change their lives. Your business, your resources, they're tools to honor God. Finally, dream big with your legacy. In Priority Living's Dream Master, couples vision cast their kingdom impact. Talk with your spouse or a mentor. How can your giving beyond the offering plate spread the gospel? Years ago, we had an extra car, a green Honda Odyssey minivan. We gave it to some missionaries who drove it until they didn't need it, then passed it on to others. For a decade, we saw that van bounce around, serving missionary after missionary until it finally gave out. That simple act of generosity showed me something. Giving isn't about tax receipts or church budgets. It's about blessing others in God's economy. Here's the mindset. You're not a money machine for a Levitical system. You're a priest in God's economy. Now, God's economy grows on love being given, just like Western economies expand when money is spent. Stingy spending creates a shrinking economy. Free flowing of generosity is a weapon against the enemy. When you give generously, you destroy greed and multiply kingdom GDP. This series will keep unpacking bold strategies for you to steward well. This week, act like a royal priest. Review your giving to your church, to ministries, to neighbors, the needy. Ask God for one way to share your resources. No receipt, nothing needed. And tell a trusted friend your plan. They don't tell you on Sunday. The currency of the kingdom is relationships backed by love. You're not just funding God's work. You're his priest, growing an economy. Give like it and watch the produce of your leadership transform lives, including yours.